Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have with us artist Anushiya Sundaralingam joining us from Belfast, Shaanea Mendis from Denmark, Liz Fernando from Germany, Chudamani Clowes joining us from London, and Dumiduni Illangasinghe joining us from Benares. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to have your works in the show at our gallery, the exhibition Little Do I Care, which is featuring 11 artists from Sri Lanka, and it's on view until the 23rd of April at our Galle Road gallery space. And while before we dive into the conversation, I think I would like to introduce each of you with your bios, and then we can begin the conversation. But yes, it's really a pleasure to have all of you here and to have this conversation. I mean, and given that five of the artists that we have in this show are not currently in Sri Lanka, it's a lovely opportunity for us to have you all gather here and share about the work which is in the show currently, and also for us to also learn about your practice and your work. So Anushiya, I'll begin the introduction with you. Anushiya Sundaralingam is an Anna Shaney Visual Arts Awardee who's based in Belfast. She works across a wide range of media, including printmaking, mixed media, installation, sculpture, painting, and performance, examining notions of identity making, lost cultures, and displacement. Her work is featured in several notable collections, including the Queen's University in Belfast and the National College of Art in Dublin. Her work has been published in the A to Z Conflict by Raking Leaves publication and Beneath the Surface publication by Create Project. Dumiduni Illangasinghe is currently based in Varanasi, pursuing her master's in painting from Banaras Hindu University. She's a visual artist and designer specializing in oil painting and mixed media, including sculptures. Her art invites viewers to contemplate the complex interplay of emotions, environment, and the material world. And her work delves into relationships between human psyche and nature, aiming to convey human emotions through tangible elements. Shaanea Mendis is a visual artist based in Copenhagen, Denmark. Her work contemplates on intricate biological patterns and textures from nature in through her pen, ink, and watercolor renderings, and experiments with oxidized iron stain, gold leaf, and verdigris. Her work is concerned with the growing distance between humankind and nature and the quick succession. Sorry, her work is concerned with the growing distance between humankind and nature and the quick succession in which forest areas are flattened to make way for urban landscapes. Liz, uh, Liz, um, Liz Fernando is a photographer based between Germany and Sri Lanka. Her work is rooted in research, engaging in a scientific, almost forensic inquiry into the boundaries of understanding and interpreting photography, through which she brings together anthropological concerns and contemporary photographic techniques to explore wider issues such as cultural difference and belonging, along with identity. Liz Fernando is a recipient of the PhotoWorks Brighton Graduate Prize and also has been a participant of Hoj International Artist Association residency. Her work is part of a collection at the World Bank headquarters in Washington, D.C. Um, Chudamani Clowes, she lives and works in London, engaging with post-colonial discourse, examining British Museum ethnographic archives and their impact on contemporary art. Her practice serves as a translation of history, offering a post-colonial perspective that challenges traditional narratives. Chudamani Close's works are also featured in the Victorian Albert Museum's collection in London and the Royal College of Art collection. All right. So I think we will straightforward dive into the questions. And Dumi, you're the first. My first question is to you. So you have been working with, this idea of mushrooms and mycelial networks in your work. You are very much inspired by it. What I would like for you to reflect on is, have you understand these organisms that exist in nature, and why is it that you turn to them for inspiration, and how do they relate to your practice?
Um, Thank you, Mariyam. Um, Actually, I have always been drawn to what exists beneath the surface. the systems that are not immediately visible but quietly sustain life. For me, my serial networks are not just biological organisms, they are kind of invisible architecture, like they are linking soil and trees each other. So, what deepen resonate me how they embody resilience. I turn to these networks because they offer a model of survival
Hmm.
within ecological, social things in a world shaped by this climate crisis and lot of fragmentation. I often thought me associate strength with hardness, permanence, and control. But my serial suggests something very different. It shows that resilience can emerge through adaptability, through connection and softness, through relation exchange. So it draws in the darkness, in decay, in what usually rejected, and yet it transformation those conditions for the nourishment. So if it exists at a very particular threshold uh, that shattered things, the point where death becomes life, this idea becomes center to my practice. Um, so I work with delicate materials that accumulation that depend on each other's together. Um, so the structure itself becomes a expression of resilience, not because it's fixed, but because it's adaptive. Um, there's also quite a political dimension to this. My serial system are decentralized. They function through care, exchange, interdependence, rather than hierarchy. And this allows me to rethink about resilience differently, not as dominance, but as something that persists, connects, and regenerates over time. So for me, mycelium becomes both a conceptual framework and material ways to um, work in. It allows me to explore how fragile systems, whether ecological, emotional, or social, can hold a form of resilience that is subtle, deeply sustained.
Right. Um, Thanks, Dumi. Shania, my next question is to you. Like very much like Dumiduni, your work is also, inspired from nature, right? But there is this, your work exists more in the interstices of what is nature and what is also urbanization and cities. So what I would like to hear from you is how you understand this relationship between nature and the city, and how does it situate within your practice?
Thanks, Mariam. I, um, I mean, nature and the relationship between nature and cities, for me, it's something very deeply intertwined rather than opposed. And I think my lived experiences through the cities that I've lived in, like having been born and grown up in Sri Lanka, and then sort of I've spent 7 years in Singapore and then 7 years in Mumbai. I grew up in an environment where, we had the lush garden with sort of rich in vegetation. Like, we had mango trees and avocado, pine, like you name it. There was so much in that. Like, as a child, I was just fascinated with just having access to this natural, organic environment to just explore in a way. And then when I was removed from that, and when I moved to Singapore when I was about 19 or 20 years old, and I think it really made me sort of almost crave this connection to a more like organic, natural environment that I needed for myself. I think like for me, the idea of the environment that we are exposed to, be it in an urban environment or a natural environment, that has a very influence on my inner environment. And I think that plays on, and I think that it affects us all, like in the sense that the environments that we expose ourselves to have an influence on our mental and physical well-being. And for me, the natural environment is so essential in that, if that makes any sense. Yeah. And cities are often imagined as separate from nature, but to me, like, nature is always present beneath, much like Dumiduni's practice, and like around and within urban life, the way that light changes on concrete, weeds pushing through cracks, or movements of water, weather and bodies through built spaces. So I'm sort of interested in this tension between the organic and the constructed, and between what is controlled and what resists control. And I try to portray this through my work, and it's a sort of a dream of a coexistence of the two, that is more organic rather than artificial in a sense.
Thanks, Shaanea. My next question is to you, Chudamani, and I guess what I would want to reflect on is, your work engages largely with histories of migration and colonial legacies, right? But I think there is also this attempt at rewriting and reimagining these histories through the mediums and the themes that you use. So I think we would really like to hear how you achieve this through your practice, and what is it that you do in your work.
Well, it's been a long process, and it keeps changing, and everything everything influences it. So from science fiction, I read Ursula K. Le Guin, The Dispossessed, and all the space things that are happening at the moment. Everything affects it. And because I grew up in Notting Hill in London, and then I found out that there used to be empire shows, and they used to bring Sri Lankan troops over and parade them, and people used to watch them, and they had to do like a 24-hour living in this hut. And suddenly it sort of triggered lots of things when I was making art. And just like the former, the artist, I also carry out this link with nature, because I was brought up, my father was a planter, and so I was brought up in the tea estate, so I knew very close to nature. And so but I also, my father's from Marthras, so and I used to go to the sea a lot, so I was influenced by the coral there, and also so I like to make this analogous links. But then in the media, you see a lot of boats arriving with people, and then you start to react to why it's happening and how they're considered. And because I'm a migrant and I've been here 50 years, I can use my autobiographical experience and my reaction to things. And I didn't like the narrative they were giving me. I just thought, well, that's not me, And like this, like we all live with elephants. I just thought that was what I was getting at school, and I was thinking, no, it's urban landscape. What are you talking about? So in a way, I made a tribe myself called the Elephant Heads, and I went to the British Museum, which has lots of artifacts, and a lot of it's hidden anyway, so you can't see most of it, like because they've got pieces of brains and bodies of people that no longer exist. So the British Museum is sort of like really helpful, but it's got things that we don't know about. And so that sort of triggered it off. And I was quite interested in all the systems that the British Empire had such an effect on Sri Lanka because they were there for over 250 years. So I like to use the tropes of it. The when Winston Churchill was moved from the Oval Office and then brought back in, I immediately. That really triggered something off in me, and because I work with ceramics, I started making busts of Winston Churchill, but I use what the tropes that they already have, so like packaging and tea and things like that, because they're sort of legacies and they influence my sort of media really. And I'm quite interested in these systems that exist, and I think I like to be subtle about it. I like people to think about what's happening. And when I'm in Sri Lanka, I could see a lot of people. I was there during the COVID. A lot of people trying to leave the country, and the economic pressures people are under to leave. So that's what my practice is about.
Thanks, Chudamani. Continuing from this idea of migration that we were talking about in Chudamani's works, Anushiya, my next question is to you. And I guess what I would want for you to reflect on and share with us is, how have you understood migration as an experience? And how do you negotiate this through your work?
Hi, thanks, Mariyam. Yeah, as I grew up in Sri Lanka through civil war until late 80s, I was in Jaffna. And so going through all the problems and conflict time. My work is like I understand migration as more than just moving from one place to another. So it's an emotional, ongoing experience because I moved from there to UK and then different places and then ended up settling in Northern Ireland. So it's an experience of one place to another place, and then see our families, everybody or our community who has been from one place to another place. So it's involves memory, loss, adaptation, and constant reshaping of our own identity. So my own journey between Sri Lanka to Northern Ireland has shaped deeply, especially returning back to Sri Lanka and during civil conflict time in 1995. That experience stayed with me and it held more fear and uncertainty, but also resilience and the need to rebuild sense of home. So my work is explored through material, and because I use quite a lot of different materials and different processes. So materials and different processes like brings different ideas together. As a multidisciplinary artist as well, I often move through two-dimensional pieces to three-dimensional work. Which allows me to physically build and reassemble fragmented memories, because we all have, fragmented memories and stories. So I use layering and repetition to reflect how identity is not just fixed, but something that is continuously formed over time. So by bringing together different materials and stories together, I connect personal experience, my own personal experience, and my community personal experience, and whatever happens in the world at the moment with the wider. I share stories of migration to people, to connect with the people and connect my work with people.
Thanks, Anushiya. Liz, the next question is to you. The work that we are showing in the exhibition Little Do I Care is a series which you created, almost a decade back, sometime in 2015, Imprint of Lovers. So I would like for you to maybe just share share a bit more about the series with us, and what prompted you to create it. At the same time, given that this was a body of work you created 10 years back, what are your observations as both an individual and an artist on the themes that you have touched upon on the series?
Hi everyone. Hi Mariyam. Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's a series that created a decade ago when I decided to stay for an extended time in Sri Lanka. So I grew up outside of Sri Lanka, and so I decided for some art research to stay. And I believe it's for many of us what we share. I mean, certain observations. I think what sets this series apart is not a personal experience I'm talking about. It's like a secondhand experience that was shared with me, that I got really interested in, together with maybe the experience of myself. Maybe the first time in my life, luckily, realizing what gender I am in a certain way means the vulnerability of gender, which to this extent I've never experienced before. And it brought me to the series when I kind of discovered the hostile idea of intimacy. And so the only tool I have is to talk about this is light and the technical gadget I'm using, which is the camera. And yeah, so this is something which I talk about in the series, is a lot about vulnerability of the gender that I'm myself sharing. I think I'm taking very much the observational side of the woman as the female being inside this, and I believe since a decade a lot of things have happened in regard of this. We had Me Too, we have a lot of discussions going on right now for gender equality, which have always been there. I mean, there's a lot of talks about these, but of course we have seen, and we also do recently see that that we are, even as women, not really safe in our own environments. I'm not really aware if you heard about what's currently happening on this regard, but let's say in my hemisphere. But so this is, I think, what since 10 years ago there is more awareness on these matters. There's more discussions. There is less hush hush about it. And yeah, so about this series, it was maybe just my own observation. It's not an experience, it's an observation, and it's secondhand recount. Yeah.
Thank you, Liz. Shaanea, the next question again comes back to you, and I think this is also about this idea of control, which is often there in your compositions, right? I mean, you work with a medium which is very fluid, but the way you navigate it is, um, there is a lot of inherent control that you have to exercise. So, what I would like you to maybe reflect on is, what does that idea of control mean for you in your work? And how do you go about using this medium, perhaps? Yeah.
So actually, I get this from so many people about how difficult a medium watercolor is. And to me, it just comes so inherently, like almost, it just comes quite intuitively and naturally to me that I can't even understand when that, I can't really relate to it being difficult to control in sense, but controlling my practice, it's not about forcing the material to behave perfectly. Yes, watercolor is inherently fluid and unstable, unpredictable. And maybe that is exactly why I'm drawn to it. I like that it can move like beyond my intentions and create these moments that I don't necessarily have planned. And I like, at the same time, I think there's this quiet structure beneath the work. I like to build on these layers, translucent layers. I mean, the control aspect, I think I just like these little moments of discovery. I think that I can play around with this very fluid.
Also, it perhaps allows you a moment to like, relax, and the sense of freedom that you also get in that relationship of like, control and freedom. I guess that's also tension which appears in your work, right? Perhaps.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, my practice is also very meditative, just like in the way that I like to observe patterns and textures in nature. The process of observation and then the process of working on the piece for me is a very meditative practice from the start to the end, sort of. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess it also allows like the way I have understood your work through conversations is, in this chaos, particularly the urban chaos, it also becomes this moment of respite that you seek through this. And I guess it's also this idea of, controlling the how do you say the external environment, so to speak, in a way, whereas you retreat into
Mhm.
yourself. I mean, that's something which at least I have, experienced through your work. Um, I mean, I would want to circle back to this idea of what does freedom mean? What does, expressing yourself mean? Maybe when we touch upon this works again. Um, Chudamani, I would also want to reflect on this subject, but, especially when you think about your work where you have these landscapes and seascapes, right? Wherein it's almost as if it's an untamed terrain that you're entering, right? So it's almost very untamed, and they stir this conversation on power dynamics, challenging a narrative which is, you know, dominantly Western, right? And, manicured landscapes, so to speak. Maybe can you just take us through your process, and can you just like elaborate on that idea?
Well, I don't like these rules. I don't like the art world rules. And I was told as fantastic lecturers, break the rules because then you'll stand out. And and that's part of my training. And I had to find my own language, and I love all the lovely landscapes I see. But I started. It's almost like my psychology of finding somewhere underwater, and then I realized, because I did marine biology before, that's my first degree, I was quite drawn to the coral and how it moved. But then also I watch a lot of those ships moving in the night. I mean, now like in Hormuz, where all the ships are stuck. You can go into an app and see how they move, and I like that sort of space being moved around, but like everyone that you've been speaking to, you start with something and then it keeps changing. And the medium, I mean, I use oil paint a lot, but the great thing about oil paint is you can stick things into it. And my landscapes keep changing. So I start off with an idea, and it inevitably it's about coral and stuff. And then it starts, taking on a life of its own. And I start collaging it, and bits of jigsaw end up in it, or fabric or something. So it's landscapes, but it's always moving, and things affect the way I think about it. And then maps that I see, or things on television, or things I see on about movements, plane movements, or things about boats arriving. They sort of affect my. I don't I sort of wanted to create my own language, so I was pasting things and taking things off, and it made a landscape. It somehow, because the human brain sort of tries to make sense of something, it did create this landscape, and also a map-like version of the cliffs of Dover, White Cliffs of Dover, for some reason. So it does make sense, but you start off somewhere, and you have to let it go, and then and keep coming back every day to the studio, and then it starts taking form. And sometimes I just paint all over it because it doesn't work. Something tells me it didn't work, and it feels like it's going to collapse, but it doesn't, because in a week later it tells you what it is. It's sort of like you have a dialogue with it. You have to have a dialogue with it, and it has to be its own person. It has to talk in its own, because I'm not there for my painting. It has to speak to somebody, speak to people and the audience by itself. I hope I let that happen, but I don't stick to rules, because I think, why am I sticking to that rule? I don't like that rule. So I make the rules. I can do what I like. And it's because when you go to work, you have to do what the boss says. And I've been a teacher for 30 years, so I know you have to follow all the rules. But this is a medium where there are no rules. You can make it up as long as the paint sticks to the canvas. You're okay, because you can really experiment, and things do go wrong. And the idea of seeing a landscape from bird's eye view as well, because I was seeing things from above, whereas people just see horizons. And I'm not really interested in horizons. I'm interested in bird's eye view, but looking down, or underwater, looking from underwater, looking up. So my perspective is very different. I know that, but I don't think that's a fault. I think that's really good, because I don't see things I see things other people can't see. And I always come back to something, and I think, why am I thinking like that? And I want other people to see this thing I'm seeing, but sometimes, most of the time, they probably don't see what I'm seeing. So I'm sort of giving them a glimpse of what I see, what I feel, because the sea, the coral, everything, they all evoke something in me, something very, very deep, hidden, something very part of my being, of being born in Sri Lanka and growing up in Sri Lanka, because of the climate, my heritage. And so when I see something like a seascape or something, it really sort of, and the colors sort of jolt me into where I am. And I'm painting all these things in a very grey, cold, freezing studio with no heating, minus centigrade. And I'm like in the middle of winter with nothing, freezing. And so I'm evoking the tropics from this cold place. But it's all in my imagination. I know that, and I know that nature is very important to me, and I use the coral as an analogy a lot. It's a tool. It's that's where I start, and that's where I end up. But I go on journeys with it.
Right. Thank you, Chudamani. Liz, I want to circle back to the series in the show. I mean, something which I found quite beautiful about the work is how the conversation happens almost in an absence, right? I mean, there is light which acts as this mediator, where you are made to feel this warmth of bodies who have inhabited these spaces, and probably the contact that they have experienced and the moments of intimacy that they may have shared. But it also happens in a language where the actors around whom this conversation is taking place are not necessarily occupying the rooms or the space, right? And um it, like, I think I was sharing with you, it almost unfolds like a whisper. It's almost hushed, almost in the same manner in which these participants, or um lovers, so to say, walk into these spaces to just share a few moments of togetherness. What I would just like to, for you to reflect on and share with us is, how you approach the framing of this subject, and particularly this almost tension of like wanting to speak about it and not wanting to speak about it, wanting to celebrate freedom and liberation of a certain type, but then at the same time using a language which perhaps um these yeah, actors or participants whom you're having this conversation about.
Yeah, I brushed upon. So it's something that I gathered from narrations, and for me it was very, very important. I'm an intruder in this. I'm not. I wanted to approach this with a lot of respect. I tried, and I think it's visible. One important thing was for me not to be judgmental about these things, because and that's the experience I had. It's very, very judgmental how it's being talked about, how the spaces kind of unfold in front of you. The space in itself is very judgmental. And it talks a lot about how then the individual perceives it. And for me, it was very important to remain respectful towards this, to remain respectful in my observations, and also to remain the aspect that I have not experienced this. So I cannot maybe give you a full storybook of how and what happens inside, because it's not something that, as I said, that was something that was naturally kind of with me. For me, I think, or to me, it was important just. Yeah, to kind of show the tenderness, as you said, and maybe in one single image to give the stories that unfold. And I don't know, like it could be a story of heartbreak, it could be a story of very tender, shared, precious moments being together. But I don't know, and I didn't intend to write a book about it, but I intended to. I think I brushed it, and I mentioned it before, to have the light narrating this. So that's the help I had, and I used it to the full extent. Nobody will ever see the entire room, the entire surroundings, the street outside, whether it's something comforting or not. It's just that I wanted to share. This is for that moment, the glance, the light, the surrounding that an individual has going to that space. It's a very anonymous hotel room, but I think what unfolds inside is not anymore anonymous for anybody who's inside. And I can also share when going there, at least I felt it's loaded with a lot of how to say, like, certain emotions. You can feel them. It's the entire I mean, as a practitioner, when going inside, I felt it myself. Obviously, I was also scared. I've gone through that experience to be scared, because I mean, I had photo equipment with me, which is also a bit unusual. So the whole thing, how I had to set it up, was not easy. Because I obviously couldn't go to the owners of the hotel. I mean, also, I don't know who they are, and say, like, I want to work on a photo series. It all had to work, yeah, in a certain way, very planned, yeah. So this is why I think I initially then thought, do I want to expose more? And I decided I don't want to do it. I want to keep it respectful. I want to keep it in a certain way also distant, and I wanted to give prominence to the light, which is drawing the entire experience inside. So that's how I felt about it.
My next question is to Dumi. Your work, which you have created, it's right now it's been growing, right? Since you have started like working on this theme. And your time in India is definitely like having an influence on the work. And I think what I would like for you to share with us is how is that cultural context, particularly in the region that you are in, shaping your practice, right? And how do your themes situate themselves within or respond to the region's very specific cultural landscape?
Yeah. Am I audible? Oh, okay. Actually, in South Asia, life is a collective rhythm. This also something I felt very strongly. That individual existence is always held within something larger, a network, people, rituals, histories, shared times. Being in Varanasi made me especially tangible. Actually, living in India rewrote my perspective and thinking how I am working with the new materials and reshape my concept. So, especially in Banaras, the rituals, the rhythms, that quiet ceremonies of daily life, they reshaped how I'm thinking about life, impermanence, with that Buddhist philosophy. So, this was something special, and all of this make resilience visible not as something dramatic, but as something quiet, repetitive, and deeply embedded in daily life. This experience shifted my sensitivity toward materials. I became more attentive to density and texture and accumulation. So my sculptural materials and palette moved closer to everyday life, culturally embedded materials that carry the traces of touch, holding memories, and stories behind that. Especially, I'm using red glass bangles. So, who are wearing that red glass bangles? They have stories with that hands, what they are doing in job and their families. Emotional, everything. So, along with this little dust and colors of the land, uh, especially I used recent works, red, vermilion red. So, in our region, it's such a powerful color of the feminine, divine, and rituals. Um, and these materials already hold resilience. They have repetition, labor. For example, when I'm working with fragile materials like glass bangles, I'm engaging with objects that carry identity, rituals, femininity, but also exist in the state of vulnerability. So when they break, that rupture carries emotional and that cultural weight. Uh, so when I'm working with that fragile materials like glass bangles, that I'm engaging with objects with identity, rituals, and femininity, but also exist in the state of that uh, stories behind that. So in my work, I take that moments and I recognize and the that fragment is not longer just a sign of loss. It becomes a part of the new structure. So resilience emerges through reassembly, to transformation. So I don't try to represent, I mean, not only India directly. Instead, I approach it as a space encounter. I'm making dialogue with this, all the rituals, what happening around me, uh, and Sri Lanka, India. Yeah, it's all. And actually, my practice um, has becoming more porous. I mean, it's absorbing everything. I mean, spiritual rhythm, what I studied in Sri Lanka and India also. So, what I think of as metabolic labor of environment. The repetitive devotional acts of care that are present in daily South Asian life, and I reconfigure these sensibilities within my own conceptual framework. I also hold what I think of as temporal tension, the coexistence of deep histories and rapidly changing that presence. I don't try to resolve this tension. I allow to remain in the work, so the work itself stays open, continue to change over time.
Thanks, Sumi. I guess one thing which we also see in your work is like there is this again conversation between what is fragile, what is also strength, and there is also this seeking of networks of support, so to say, right? There's also this falling
Yeah.
back on cultures as a metaphor. And talking about that, I guess I want to touch upon how, Anushiya uses language in her work. to anchor her practice, right? Because oftentimes visuals in your, like the visual forms in your work emerge almost as metaphors, like, you use hair and it links back as threads, as threads which link back to community, and then also as these rib cages, the body of work she had created has been working with some time, wherein again you're thinking about this idea of nest, a vessel, a mode of transport, an anchor. So I think what I would like to again, ask you is, how do these metaphors evolve in your practice, and where do you draw them from, and how do they find their way into your practice?
Yeah, the language for me extends beyond words and becomes something visual and materials, because I'm interested in different type of materials. And even with my work, the subject matter, it's all connects, but it changes as well. So like you said, the hair, the vessels, the body parts, and the nature. So I work with all different subject matter. So as an artist, I enjoy different materials, which is man-made or natural materials. And the natural materials comes from Sri Lanka's banana tree fibers to fibers from here, the flax, which is a historical material for the Northern Ireland. So it's like where I come from and where I live, all the things, all the subject or materials wise is all relates to my work. For me, the materials is holds its own memory of sense of place. So again, so it's where I come from and where I am living at the moment. So everything influences as well. So metaphor is very important in my work. It helps to express things that are difficult to say. So visually, then I can create rather than in words. So often work with from like boats, the shape, the vessels or the boats, the hair, the body parts, and the figures. In my hair series, I connect identity, culture, history, memory, and rituals. Again, the others are saying. So they all, because in our culture, they're all very strongly, we are all strongly influenced by the culture, the rituals, everything. And this, in this work, I connect both personal experience, because in my work, there are quite a lot of personal, even with the hair stories I have personal, which I like. Sometimes I don't like to talk about. It's not the right time to talk. So whenever the right time comes, I will. And it's kind of it's a strong sense of the hair is identity. And the culture in meaning in our culture, the hair becomes when we were growing up, we can't even leave the hair down. We have to put it up. We had to plait. That is a strong identity for the culture. So, it's deeply, especially in the culture, I associate with the care and the tradition as well. The tradition is important, and so, especially in Southeast Asian countries, the hair becomes a symbolic for so many different rituals. And hair becomes a passage of time as well. It says the time, so that is important. So, and again, with my series of work with the rib cage or the body parts series, I introduced another layer, which it's such as a protection and the pain and the structure. So the structure, and in my vessel work as well, the boat series, the structure, the fragmented shapes or forms is holds together the tension and the pain. So I try to create and explain or expose this type of work or the mental state. So yeah, and it holds the body together, but also express fragility as well. So some of my boat series or the body parts, they are not connected, they are broken, they are damaged, and I used like medical tablet boxes. And there are words that show, so there are words comes like as lost or dropped or deep or that I allowed to show that, but the rest of the material is covered by man-made material or natural materials like beeswax and different things as well, or threads. I'll wrap with threads quite a lot, and as Dominique, she said, it's like you use bangles. I have used glass bangles in the past, a long time ago, and bring nature, quite a lot of nature stuff, leaves and fibers and different things. So I'm interested in tension to how we connect emotionally and historically as well with the materials that I use, and the experience all connects. Over time in my work, these forms of process and develop into a visual language, so that people can understand. Like you all said, some people do understand, some people don't understand. Still, people come and say, my vessels, boats, they don't look like boats. But to me, they are in so many different ways. And for some people, it doesn't. And I have created like large boats with banana tree fibers and created installation pieces. And again, my work varies from very, very tiny, small pieces to really large scale as well. And it all allows me to communicate different ideas. And I create work that open to wider audience to express universal stories of displacement and belonging, memory, and identity. So I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense, Anusha, because I think looking at these works that we have in the exhibition, it's like you said, right? There is this aspect of care which is tied into the work, as like, grandparents or our parents would like probably tie our hair together. But at the same time, being away from your cultural homeland, it almost feels like something. When you look at those works, you feel that they are parts of a body, like disembodied body parts, which are almost wanting to like go back to the roots. So there is that surge and that longing which comes through in the work. So I guess that ties in very beautifully, metaphorically speaking, in tying in language, culture, experiences, so on and so forth. So yes, we have, sorry.
Sorry, can I say one thing is, even in the hair series, I used the linen, which
Yes.
is flax fibers, and the linen. So flax, linen comes from flax. So the flax transferred into linen, the linen fibers and the flax fibers was put into three-dimensional pieces, and from three-dimensional pieces into two-dimensional pieces. So you will see the fragility and the nature and the roots. It's always the roots are important as well in my work throughout. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for having been here and taking time out from your busy schedules to have this conversation with us. And I guess I also learned a lot from all of you through these conversations, a little bit more about your works. So thank you for that. And lovely seeing you guys.